Cathy had been sitting in the corridor of the polyclinic for about 20 minutes, staring blankly ahead. It had been 20 minutes since her life had faded, in every sense of the word. She couldn't understand why fate had dealt her such a terrible blow. Just half an hour ago, she had felt like the happiest woman and mother on earth. A grey-haired doctor, who had recently delivered Cathy's fatal diagnosis, approached her. "Why aren't you going home? You need to calm down and gather yourself. Yes, the disease is progressing and time is running out, but there's no reason to lose hope. You, as a young woman, have the strength to fight for your life," said the doctor in a calm tone. "Doctor, tell me the truth. What are my chances?" Cathy asked, raising her sky-blue gaze to the doctor. "Well, I won't lie, the chance is minuscule, but it's still worth taking. I've already mentioned the treatment in Germany. If you had the opportunity to go to their clinic, the chances would increase significantly." "No, that's not even up for discussion. My husband and I never had that kind of money," Cathy replied, lowering her head. "All right then. We'll proceed with the surgery here. Please go to the hospital tomorrow. Every minute counts. Now, I apologise, but I must hurry," said the doctor. Cathy had been unlucky in life since birth. She never knew her father and had no pleasant memories of her mother. The image of her dishevelled, unkempt mother with a perpetually swollen face, who inexplicably hated her own daughter, was all that Cathy could remember. Her mother had abandoned her at the train station when she was just 6 years old. Cathy was brought up in an orphanage. Her child was as dark and grey as her life with her mother. But everything changed instantly. After graduating from school, Cathy met her future husband, Jim. Jim was remarkably handsome, with bright blue eyes framed by long, thick eyelashes that would make any woman envious. His manly face always radiated a kind and open smile. Not long ago, Jim had moved to the capital from the village. His army comrade arranged a job for Jim as a guard for a wealthy man who collected various art objects. Cathy and Jim's relationship developed quickly. After 6 months, they realised they wanted to spend their lives together and quickly got married. Jim treated Cathy with great reverence. He adored his beloved, and after the birth of their son, felt that his family was the happiness every man dreams of. Cathy's cell phone interrupted her thoughts, causing her to startle awake. It was Jim calling. "Hi," Cathy answered. She tried to sound calm, but Jim immediately sensed the sadness in her voice. "Cathy, what's wrong? I've been trying to reach you for an hour. The teacher called me and said that you didn't pick up Sean from kindergarten." "Sorry, I was delayed at the doctor's. I'm on my way to pick up our son," Cathy quickly replied. "Cathy, are you all right?" Jim asked with concern. "Yes," Cathy forced herself to say, before ending the call to prevent herself from bursting into tears. That evening, Jim came home from work early and saw the tearful eyes of his wife. He realised that something serious had happened. "Cathy, don't you want to tell me anything? I feel that something's happening," Jim asked from the doorway. "Let's go to the kitchen. I don't want Sean to hear our conversation," the woman said in a detached voice. The conversation was long and heavy. Once the initial shock had passed, Jim began to think feverishly about where to get the money. He didn't want to consider his wife's treatment at a local clinic. If the doctors were recommending going to Germany, he had to make every effort to find the money. "Even if I sell the house in the village, we still won't have half the money," the husband suggested. "That's not an option. Your mother lives in that house. Where would she go? And you're right, it's not enough. Our real estate is worth next to nothing," Cathy replied. "I'll talk to Mr. Borstein tomorrow morning. He's a very wealthy man. Perhaps he'll lend me the necessary amount. I'll even get on my knees if I have to. It's the only way out of this situation." "Jim, even if he gives you the money, How will you repay the debt? Cathy said in despair. The situation is really hopeless, and we shouldn't do anything. I'm going to the hospital tomorrow. Let's hope for our medicine. And God... No, Cathy, I don't want to, and I can't risk losing you. Please give me a chance. Understand that if God forbid you're gone, I won't survive it. If you don't want to think about me, think about our son. I know there are no hopeless situations. There's always at least one chance. Cathy didn't know what to say in response to Jim. She was afraid to imagine what he and Sean would do if she were gone. The next day, Jim went to work early in the morning. After waiting for his boss to wake up and come down to the dining room, he decided to take action. He had worked for Mr. Borstein's family for almost 5 years and had managed to earn the respect and trust of the wealthy man. Apologizing for the interruption, the young man got straight to the point. Mr. Borstein listened to his head of security without interrupting. Jim, with all due respect, I have to refuse. $120,000. Do you know anything about money? It will take a lot of time to repay such a debt, the man said. Jim realized that he was right, but he also understood that for Mr. Borstein, the amount needed for Cathy's treatment was minuscule, but for them, it was a chance for life. I beg you, please help me. I promise that I will definitely repay this money. I don't know when, but I will definitely pay off the debt. Understand, it's about the most precious person to me, my beloved wife and the mother of my son. No one can save her except you. She'll die if she doesn't take this chance. And Cathy is only 25 years old, the same age as your youngest daughter, Audrey, Jim said, realizing that he was speaking nonsense and not knowing how to persuade this man. All right, I have a proposition for you, the boss replied after a moment's thought. Come to my office in an hour. Jim could barely contain his joy. If Mr. Borstein didn't refuse, then he would help. It meant that Cathy would be able to go to Germany for treatment. Honey, I think he agreed. Call the doctor and tell him the money will be there. Tell him to make arrangements with the clinic in Germany. This can't be, the woman whispered. Jim, I'll pray for you until the end of my days. Unable to contain herself, Cathy cried into the phone. I love you. I can't lose you. Don't cry, my love. You will definitely get better. Jim spoke into the receiver and ended the call. Mr. Borstein was sitting in a huge leather armchair and drinking whiskey. Jim realized that the boss was nervous because he rarely drank in the morning. Sit down, Jim. Have a drink with me? The boss asked. Thanks, but no, I'm driving, and I've got work until tonight. Okay, I'll get to the point. You need money? A lot of it. I need a painting. It's worth about $150,000. If you would bring me this painting, I would gladly buy it from you, squinted Mr. Borstein, drilling the guard with a piercing glance. Bring it from where? Jim did not understand. It's in the museum. In a settlement located in one of the regional centres. There are no guards there, but you know what I mean. Jim was taken aback by his boss's suggestion. He could have expected anything, but not an offer to steal a painting. Over the years, Mr. Borstein had seemed to him a noble, judicious and honest man. But now he took off his mask in front of Jim and showed his true nature. The collector revealed his essence. Silence reigned in the office. The young man pondered feverishly over his boss's proposal, and he waited calmly, giving the guard time to think it over. Jim clearly realized that he had to agree. It was the only way out of the situation. He would do anything, just to be in time to save the woman he loved. Suppose I get you the painting, but you realise that such things are not done in a day or two, right? In order for everything to go well, it is necessary to carefully prepare and calculate everything. And my wife unfortunately has no time to wait. I understand. Besides, I respect you and trust you. So, I'll give you the necessary amount, so to speak, as a loan, agreed Mr. Borstein after a little thought. I am truly grateful to you, and I promise I won't let you down, Jim assured his boss. It's a deal. Now, take Audrey to the airport, and afterwards you can come back and pick up the money. Audrey, Mr. Bornstein's youngest daughter, was a particularly flighty and spoiled person. The girl had a congenital disproportion of limbs. Over time, a few more problems were added: pelvic curvature, scoliosis posture. Audrey was beautiful, but the overall picture was spoiled by her figure. In child, she was treated with traditional methods, but apparently they did not improve her condition. Her parents pitied the sick child and spoiled her in every possible way. Therefore, it is not surprising that she grew up a hysterical bore who was accustomed to getting everything at the first order. She hated her mother and regarded her as the cause of her health deviations. She also hated her older sister, who was stunning, with an enviable figure and long, slender legs. Audrey had no friends, and even her father's wealth did not help her in her personal life. Most guys looked at her with pity, and some with mockery. Going to the islands again? Jim smiled, helping Audrey into the car. Yes, this time to Hawaii, the girl bragged. You can't imagine how great it is there. So much exoticism, contrast. If you left your boring wife, we could travel together. Jim froze, not expecting his boss's daughter to be so bold. Yes, he had noticed the way Audrey looked at him on several occasions. He realised that she liked him very much. For him, it was nothing new. Many women admired his looks, although he never understood what was so special about him that attracted the opposite sex so much. Hey, Audrey, where were you before? Jim winked, trying not to offend the girl. It's a pity that I met Cathy first and not you. But nothing can be changed. I'm married and loyal to one person. There's no need to wiggle in front of me and pretend, Audrey snorted. I overheard your conversation with my father, and I know that your wife is sick, and you're looking for money for treatment. I could ask my father for that amount for her, but you'd have to leave Cathy and marry me. Agreed? Weren't you taught that eavesdropping is not good? Marvelled the man. I'm sorry, Audrey, but I'll deal with my own problems. I don't need your help. Audrey pouted her lips and turned away to the window, showing with her entire demeanour that she was very offended by Jim. Jim was shocked by the cocky and arrogant young woman, wondering how she had overheard their conversation with the boss. After taking Audrey to the airport, Jim drove back to his boss. He wanted to have the necessary sum of money in his hands before calling Cathy with the happy news. Mr. Borstein was in his office when Jim entered. Silently, he opened the safe and put several stacks of $100 bills on the table after a minute. Send your wife abroad and get down to business. Consider this a service leave. I hope, Jim, you won't disappoint me. Otherwise, it will be your own fault, the man said. Don't worry, I won't let you down, and thank you for your help, Jim replied, taking the money and leaving the office. 2 weeks later, Cathy left for the German clinic. Credit must be given to her doctor, who quickly arranged everything with his German colleagues and handled all the necessary paperwork. Jim didn't tell his wife about his dealings with Mr. Borstein. He had to lie and say that the boss showed leniency and generosity, deciding to help Cathy for free. My dear, if I don't come back, please promise me that you'll never let anyone hurt our Sean, Cathy cried at the airport. What are you talking about? Jim frowned, understanding exactly what his wife meant. If I don't make it, sooner or later you'll meet another woman. That's normal. A man shouldn't be alone, but please, don't leave our son, and don't let this woman hurt him. Cathy, calm down right now. And don't even think about anything bad, Jim shouted at his wife. Remember what the doctor said. Having a positive attitude and faith in healing greatly increases the success of treatment. Why are you talking about some non-existent woman who can never replace you? Even if something were to happen to you someday, I would never abandon my son, and I certainly wouldn't bring him a stepmother. Honey, you will come back. Our son and I love you very much, and you won't dare not to come back to us. Do you hear me? I hear you. Thank you, my dear. I'm grateful to heaven for giving me you, Cathy whispered and rushed to hug her husband. Jim was about to get into the car when he heard a familiar female voice calling him. Turning around, he saw Audrey with a suitcase and frowned. What a surprise, the girl exclaimed. My father told me you were on vacation. I was going to take a cab. Hello, Audrey. How was your vacation? Jim tried to be polite to the insolent girl. You're right. I'm on vacation. I just saw my wife off. At last, you're free from this burden, the girl rejoiced. Take my suitcase and let's go. I'm tired after the flight, and I want to take a bath soon. First, my Cathy is not a burden. She is my beloved woman. And secondly, as I told you, I'm on vacation. I have to take my son to my mother. I'm sorry, Audrey, but I'm rushing, Jim said angrily, and quickly got into the car driving away. The village welcomed Jim with a warm and colourful sunset. After parking at the gate, he got out of the car and took a deep breath of fresh air. For a moment he closed his eyes and reminisced about his carefree childhood, youth, moonlit walks until dawn, and his first kiss and love. It's been a long time, he thought. The gate creaked softly, and Jim smiled when he saw his mother rushing to hug her. Son, what took you so long? I was getting worried. How's Sean? How did he handle the journey? Sarah asked, her smile fading instantly. Sean feels best of all, Jim laughed. He fell asleep on the way out of town and is still sleeping. Sonny, what happened to Cathy? Don't spare me. Tell it like it is, Sarah asked, and the smile immediately fell from her lips. The situation is serious, but there's still a chance. Mum, let's talk later. I'm exhausted. Okay, I'm sorry. Take my grandson and let's go inside. I've prepared dinner, Sarah said. Jim was Sarah's only son. He was born out of wedlock, and at the time, his mother had a very difficult time. Sarah was fired from her position as a math teacher. They claimed that a woman with her reputation had no place in a school among children. But Sarah didn't give up. For the sake of her son, she pulled herself together and devoted her whole life to him. A little later, she was offered to return to work and school, but she refused. She couldn't forget the unfair insults, squabbles and slanted glances. Sarah lived with her parents and found a job in the library, leading a modest lifestyle. The identity of Jim's father remained a mystery to everyone, as Sarah didn't even disclose it to her relatives. As a child, Jim often asked where his father was, but Sarah always gave the same response. He left forever. Now Sarah lived alone, and she was delighted that her grandson would be living with her for a while. Jim talked to his mother until dawn, sharing everything, except the fact of what he was going to do in exchange for money for Cathy's treatment. After a couple of hours of sleep, he said goodbye to his mother and son and headed to a small town where the boss's desired painting was located. By evening, he arrived and checked into the town's only hotel before going to a cafe for a meal. Afterward, he walked to the museum and observed that the building had an alarm system, but no night guard. Returning to his room, he contemplated his next steps. The next morning, Jim decided to visit the museum, the town's only attraction. Without a plan of action yet, he went to explore. Good morning. It is a pleasure to welcome you to our museum. My name is Robin, and I am the tour guide. I would be honoured to introduce you to our collection of paintings, said the friendly blonde guide as she approached him. To be honest, I don't want to trouble you, Jim smiled. I decided to pass the time and, out of curiosity, I stopped by your museum." "Oh no," exclaimed Robin. "For me it's not just a job. It's my life's work. I simply adore art, and even have a few paintings of my own." "Really?" Jim acted surprised. "Well then, I'd be honoured to spend time in your company." Half an hour later, Jim and the guide were chatting like old friends. Robin enthusiastically described each painting, adding vibrant colours to even the most ordinary canvases that didn't evoke any emotions in Jim. He couldn't understand how one could admire a painted apple on a white saucer. When they reached the painting he needed, Jim focused. "It's a French painter from the end of the 19th century." Robin tried to convey the uniqueness of the artwork. "The painting is estimated to be expensive. Unfortunately, it is not well known among art admirers. Only a few knowledgeable collectors recognise its true value." "And is it possible for anyone to acquire it?" Jim inquired. "No way. This painting is the pride of our museum, and naturally it's not for sale at any price," said Robin confidently. "We are honoured to own this unique masterpiece. It has a long and fascinating history. If you're interested, I can tell you sometime about how it came to be in our museum." "Thank you. I've gained so much useful and informative information during this hour." Jim smiled his disarming smile. "If I have a free moment, I'll definitely come back for another look. But for now, I'm sorry, I'll have to excuse myself. I have a meeting with a business associate, scheduled in half an hour." "It's a pity you're leaving already," Robin said sadly. "I still haven't shown you everything. By the way, you're not from around here, are you?" "No, our company is expanding and plans to have an office in your beautiful town. I'm in the process of making that happen." "I knew right away you were a businessman, and you know nothing about art." The guide laughed good-naturedly. "I can see you're not easily fooled." Jim played along. "You're right. I can see through people," replied Robin coquettishly. "Robin, I don't mean to be forward, but may I ask what you're doing tonight? The thing is, I don't know anyone in your town, and my evenings are very dull. Perhaps we could have dinner together?" Jim asked with hope in his eyes. "Ah, why not?" Robin agreed, blushing. "Great. I'll be waiting for you at 2000 hours at the Caprice restaurant." "Deal." The girl smiled and led the only visitor to the exit. Jim's mood was entirely ruined. He felt like a monstrous scoundrel who was going to play with the feelings of this young, naive girl. His plan was to make her fall in love with him and try to steal the necessary painting. No matter how much he tried to persuade himself or justify his heinous act, he felt terrible inside. The only thought of Cathy gave him strength and prevented him from giving up. The sound of an incoming text brought Jim back to reality. "I'm fine. The doctor conducted a complete examination and scheduled the operation for the day after tomorrow," his wife wrote. "Beloved, I'm sure you will recover. Our son is with my mother. We love you and are waiting for you," Jim replied and headed towards the hotel. Until evening, he worked out a plan of action. Everything depended on Robin's behaviour, and regardless of the circumstances, Jim had to make the girl fall in love with him. He didn't notice how quickly time passed, and when he glanced at his watch, he began to get ready for their date. Entering a cosy restaurant, Jim chose a table by the window and patiently waited for Robin. The girl arrived exactly at 8, as if she wanted to demonstrate her punctuality and sincere respect for Jim. They placed their order and spent a wonderful evening in a relaxed atmosphere. "Robin, tell me about your work and paintings," Jim smiled. "To be honest, I don't have anything interesting to share. I graduated from college and have been working at a museum for a year and a half. I live with my grandmother, who has raised me since I was 3 years old. My parents passed away when I was young, and I don't remember them at all. That's basically my whole life. You could say it's been quite measured and boring. What about you? Why don't you tell me about yourself?" Robin replied. Well, I don't have anything special to boast about either. Just like you, I studied at college, and now I'm focused on my career. I'm not married, as I feel there hasn't been time for that yet. I believe a man should establish himself first, before considering family and children. My only family is my mum, who lives in the village. I work in the capital and recently bought an apartment. Jim lied without hesitation. So, you could say you're already well established. The girl laughed. Yes, you're right. It's about time to think about starting a family, Jim replied with a serious expression. That night they walked along the embankment until morning, and at dawn Jim confessed his love to Robin. The girl blushed for a moment, then buried her face in the man's chest, holding back tears of happiness and joy. You know, I never believed in love at first sight, but now I realize that it truly exists, Robin whispered. To be honest, I've fallen deeply in love. I can't even imagine how I lived all these years without you, Jim lied, playing his role perfectly. Robin, I want you to be my wife, to be the mistress of my home and my life. Do you agree? I don't know, the girl replied confused. I mean, of course I agree, but it feels too sudden. We've only known each other for a few hours, Robin stammered. I'm not rushing you, my love. I will wait for your answer as long as necessary, the man said seriously, embracing the girl tightly and kissing her tenderly. Their passionate and intense romance continued for another week. During this time, Jim had gained complete trust from the naive girl. He had even learned the code to disable the alarm system and was contemplating how and when to complete what he had started. He also got wonderful news from Cathy. She had undergone a major operation, and every day her condition improved, and her attending doctor even made optimistic predictions about her recovery. Jim was happy. God had shown mercy to their family and granted Cathy a second chance at life. At the same time, he berated himself and found no peace day or night. After all, he was deceiving Robin, a beautiful, honest and open-minded girl. The last thing Jim wanted was to cause her heartbreak, but he saw no other way out. He had to steal the damn painting to pay off his boss. Mr. Borstein was a grave man. He was tough and unforgiving when it came to debts. Jim realized that if he didn't complete his assignment, this man would wipe him and his family off the face of the earth. And the man couldn't let that happen. He was determined to ensure that Cathy and her son would live happily ever after. Jim, can't you hear me? Asked Robin, noticing that her beloved man seemed lost in thought. I'm sorry, my dear. I was just deep in thought. There were some work issues. Jim smiled and placed the cup of cooled coffee on the table. Is it something serious? The woman asked anxiously. No, everything can be resolved, don't worry. I wanted to mention that Granny is expecting us for lunch. I've already told her everything and she's very excited to meet you. In the evening, Grandma will leave to visit her sister in the village, so we can spend the night at my place and have some time together, she said. Wonderful, rejoiced the man. Honestly, I'm tired of this hotel. Jim couldn't help but think that everything was going to work out just fine. After all, tonight was the night he planned to steal the painting and escape from this town that had become boring for him. Mrs. Porter turned out to be a very kind old lady. She treated Jim just like her own grandson and served him delicious pies. She didn't ask the guest any unnecessary questions. She was a tactful and wise woman, open and kind, just like her granddaughter. How difficult it is to deceive these people, thought the man, savouring the delicious raspberry tea. After lunch, Mrs. Porter hurriedly excused herself and left for the village for a few days. It seemed she did it deliberately, giving the couple a chance to be alone together. Jim and Robin decided to take a walk along the embankment. They returned home close to midnight. the man volunteered to prepare dinner for Robin. He made a Greek salad and brewed tea. He discreetly added sleeping drops to the girl's cup, as she needed a sound sleep that night. After dinner, Robin suddenly felt unwell. Her legs turned to cotton and her eyelids grew heavy. She tried to say something to Jim, but couldn't, and fell asleep in the chair. The man carefully moved Robin to the bed and whispered softly, "Please forgive me, if you can." He took the keys to the museum from Robin's purse before he left. Everything went swiftly and smoothly. Jim easily disarmed the alarm system, and within 3 minutes he was already leaving the old building. He locked the metal door, set the alarm, and sped away in his car. Within a few hours, Jim arrived at Mr. Borstein's house. Despite the early hour, he called his boss and informed him that the task was complete and he was waiting at the gate. A few minutes later, Mr. Borstein opened the heavy gate, motioning for Jim to drive into the yard. "How did it go? Are you sure you're not being followed?" the boss inquired, examining the canvas with an unhealthy gleam in his eyes. "There's no pursuit, and there won't be. I've been staying at the hotel under a different identity. I hope it would be difficult to find me, and even if they do, they'll never be able to prove my guilt. It's clean. No signs of forced entry, no witnesses. It's a shame for the innocent girl I took advantage of. She'll be the one facing trouble, enduring investigation, and likely getting fired eventually." "Well, it's not fatal. She'll recover," the older man chuckled. "But tell me, how's your wife doing?" "Cathy is doing well. She's steadily recovering." "You did the right thing, rescuing the mother of your child. You should be proud of yourself. I'll give you a bonus and some time off. Now, Jim, you need to lay low. It would be better to go to your mother's place just to be safe. And remember, if you get caught, don't even think about ratting me out. Otherwise neither you nor your family will be safe," Mr. Borstein said sternly. "Yes, sir. By the way, how big will the bonus be? Maybe I'll have enough for a round-trip ticket to Berlin. During my forced vacation, I could visit Cathy," Jim asked, realizing he was pushing his luck. "What a cheeky bug you are," the boss laughed. "All right, I'm pleased with your work, so I'll give you a bonus that will cover your trip to Germany." Jim defied the boss's orders and bought a bicycle for his son before going to visit his mother for a day. Sean looked at the new bicycle with delight and immediately told his father that he did not want to go home. He liked it better at his grandmother's. Sarah praised her grandson tirelessly, admiring what an obedient and clever little boy Sean was. At the same time, Sean's mother noticed that something was bothering him. Jim's gaze became fleeting and sad. "Son, are you in trouble? You don't look well. Is everything all right? Is Cathy getting better? And you seem very nervous," the woman asked directly. "Everything's fine, Mum," Jim smiled. "I'm just a little tired. I need some sleep, and things will get better." Jim hugged his mother and immediately felt some relief in his soul. Just like in his distant childhood, all fears and problems disappeared when he was around his mother. Early in the morning, Jim kissed his sleeping son, said goodbye to his mother, and went to the airport. He didn't tell his mother about his trip to Germany. He was confident that he wouldn't be found out, but being cautious had never harmed anyone. Berlin greeted him with overcast skies and cold rain. Jim didn't inform Cathy about his visit. He wanted to give his wife a pleasant surprise. Taking a taxi, he went straight to the clinic where she was undergoing rehabilitation. Upon arriving at the correct address, Jim found out at the reception which ward his wife was in. After receiving the necessary information, he hurried to the 3rd floor. When Jim opened the door to the room, he thought he had made a mistake. Looking at the sign again, he froze in complete disbelief. For a moment, his vision darkened and his ears rang terribly. "I'm sorry, I guess I'm in a wrong time," he muttered, realizing that he was rambling. "Jim!" Cathy turned pale, finally breaking free from the doctor's strong embrace. "Why are you here?" "Well, I thought I'd surprise you," Jim smirked, coming to his senses. I see, my dear, you're much better. German doctors are like magicians, you could say. Excuse me, I have to go to other patients, said the dark-haired doctor with an accent, quickly leaving the room. Cathy turned her gaze to the window, unsure of where to begin the serious conversation. She had rehearsed this unpleasant conversation with her husband hundreds of times in her mind, but she didn't expect it to happen so soon. Are you speechless, Cathy? Nothing to say? You know, I don't know what to say to you either. If you were a man, I'd punch you a couple of times. Frankly, I'm shocked, completely bewildered. How could you? What have you been lacking? Jim asked bitterly. I'm sorry, if that's possible, whispered Cathy. All these years, I thought I loved you, but then I met Hubert and realised that what I felt for you couldn't be called true love. I have great respect and appreciation for you, but I never truly loved you. The doctor and I had a love at first sight, and when he made a move on me, I couldn't resist. Don't worry about the money. We'll pay you back. Within a couple of years, David will give you the money you gave me for treatment. We're serious. I'm only going back to my home country to finalise the divorce and take Sean. Don't even think about it, Jim hissed with anger. If you dare to take my son away, I'll strangle you with my own hands. I'm not trying to scare you. Don't test my patience. Don't come home. We can be divorced remotely. Goodbye, Cathy. I hope I never see you again. Jim didn't remember how he left the clinic or how he got to the airport. For a moment, it seemed to him that life had come to a halt, that his soul had become empty and his heart had turned to stone. He couldn't comprehend how she could betray him, their family, and their love in such a cruel manner. After all, he had barely slept when he found out Cathy was suffering with a terrible disease. He would have given his life to keep her alive. And Cathy had trampled on their lives, disregarded their souls, and forever shattered his faith in women and family. Upon returning from Berlin, Jim went home. He didn't want to hide or run away. He no longer cared about what would happen to him now if the police managed to track him down. Not knowing how to numb his unbearable heartache, the betrayed man began to drink heavily. After a few days, Cathy's image became distant and blurred for him, but the image of Robin was quite distinct. Jim dreamt about the girl in delirious dreams. Robin was very frightened and always crying and pulling her hands towards him. Jim wanted to comfort the unhappy girl, rushed towards her, but immediately woke up, falling into the dark abyss. His mother's call brought him back to life and reality. "Son, we had a misfortune. I broke my leg and cannot cope with the household and grandson alone." "I'll be there tonight, Mum. Hold on," Jim said confidently, and went straight to the bathroom to clean up. A few hours later, Jim rushed to his most beloved people. The news of his mother's fracture had literally brought him back to life. He berated himself for giving in to weakness and almost ending up on the bottom because of the woman who didn't deserve it. Realizing that he had a mother and a son who needed him, Jim decided to pull himself together. He resolved to remove the cheating woman from his head and heart and give love and care to the people who truly deserved it. Seeing her son, Sarah immediately sensed that something terrible had happened. Jim had lost 10 kilograms, become gaunt, and had the first grey hair appearing on his temples. "What's wrong with Cathy, son? Don't spare me, tell me the truth. Is she alive?" the woman pleaded. "Don't worry about her, she's alive and well, it seems. Mum will discuss this later, I'm tired." "All right, son," the mother replied, completely unaware. Jim took over the household chores for his mother, strictly forbidding her from doing anything. In the evenings, he went fishing with Sean. The boy was thrilled with rural life and repeatedly expressed his desire not to return to the city. Strangely enough, he never once mentioned his mother, as if Cathy had never been a part of his life. "Son, what if Mum and I were to live separately? Who would you want to live with, Mum or me?" Jim asked cautiously. "With you and with Grandma," answered the little boy without hesitation. "Don't be a flatterer, tell the truth," laughed Jim. "I'm not pretending, Dad. You and Grandma never yell at me, never hit me with a belt. And Mum is mean. I'm afraid of her." Sean frowned. "Son, are you telling the truth? I've never seen Mum hit you with a belt." "I'm not lying." The boy stood his ground. "She used to hit me when you were at work, and she wouldn't let me tell you. She said she would punish me." Looking into his son's eyes, Jim realized he was telling the truth. It turns out that for several years he had lived with a deceitful woman who punished and abused their son in his absence. She pretended to be a loving wife while secretly running away from him at the first opportunity. "Don't worry, son. I won't let Cathy take you away, and I won't let anyone hurt you," promised Jim, hugging his son tightly. Upon returning home, Jim noticed that his mother was confused and clearly worried about something. "Cathy called me. She said she would come for Sean in a week," the woman said in a trembling tone. "Jim, please explain to me what's going on. Cathy said she had some things she needs to take care of." "She cheated on me with the doctor who was treating her. She's going to stay with him in Germany and wants to take Sean." "My God, that can't be. She's out of her mind. How could Cathy betray you? After all, you adored her. You were ready to do anything for her," exclaimed the woman, unable to hold back her tears. "Mum, don't cry. Cathy is a bad person. You shouldn't get upset and cry because of her. She won't take our son. I won't let her have him. If necessary, I'll go to court and seek to have her parental rights revoked. I'll take Sean away for a while. This person will come here sooner or later, and I don't want the child to be anxious or witness unpleasant conversations." "By the way, Jim, Sean has repeatedly complained that his mother treats him roughly. He said she often hits him and threatens him with punishment. Is this true?" Sarah asked. "Apparently. It is true. She never allowed herself to mistreat him in my presence, but I remember that Sean was indeed afraid of her. I don't understand one thing. How could I have overlooked it?" "No wonder. You loved her and treated her blindly. Son, where are you taking Sean?" "I don't know yet. I'll definitely think of something. I don't care where we go. The main thing is to hide him from his mother." "Jim, I think I know where you should go. Please listen to me without interrupting. I've never told you about your father, but I guess we can't do without his help," Sarah said, lowering her head. Jim stiffened, looking at his mother, afraid she might change her mind and not tell him something that had troubled him his whole life. The topic of his father had always been taboo in the family. "A long time ago," the woman began her story, "Gregory came to our village for his cousin's wedding and stayed for 2 weeks. We met at the wedding. When I met him, I felt a rush of emotions that turned my world upside down. It was love at first sight, a love that would last a lifetime. I lost track of time and reality, as if I were in paradise with only him. Your father was very handsome. You looked just like him. He was very charming and spoke beautifully. I became completely infatuated and thought of nothing but him for 2 weeks. Gregory promised to take me with him and that we would definitely get married. He confessed his love and then disappeared without even saying goodbye. Later, I found out he had a wife. He had cruelly deceived me, but I have no regrets because from this love I got you. 2 years ago, Gregory came to his aunt's funeral. Strangely enough, he hadn't forgotten about me and came to apologize for his deception. He said he had truly fallen in love with me and couldn't control his feelings. We sat in the garden, drank tea and talked for a long time. At first, I didn't want to tell him, but eventually I admitted that he had a son. Gregory was overjoyed by the news. It turned out he had been lonely at that time. His wife had passed away a few years ago, and they didn't have any children. He began asking to meet you, but I refused, saying you didn't need a father because you were already a father yourself and stood firmly on your own. Gregory asked me to reconsider and not be so categorical. He left his address and phone number, saying he would wait for you. I think you and Sean should go to him. Jim remained silent. His head was spinning from the information he had just received. This was roughly how he imagined the story of his birth. Should he be angry at his father? Probably not. Many people make mistakes when they are young, and it wasn't his place to judge his parents' mistakes. Call my father and ask if he's ready for me and his grandson, Jim said confidently. Stepping onto the platform of an unfamiliar southern town, Jim took his son's hand and looked around. They recognized each other instantly, even though they had never seen each other before. Gregory blushed and hesitated for a moment, but then pulled himself together, smiled, and approached his family. So, how was your trip, guys? Great. For Sean, the trip was like a little adventure. It was his first time travelling by train, Jim replied. Strangely, he felt calm and at peace next to his father, as if he had known him his whole life. Gregory carried himself well, trying to joke and smile, but the sadness in his eyes hinted that the man was probably unhappy and lonely. Come, my dears, I'm so glad you decided to come. Gregory couldn't contain his feelings and emotions. Jim's father lived in a spacious house near the sea. As it turned out, he had his own business, with 2 service stations and a network of car washes around the city. Wanting to welcome his son and grandson in style, he had arranged a luxurious lunch at a restaurant. After lunch, Gregory suggested taking Sean to the sea. The boy was delighted, and it was difficult to get him out of the warm water. Grandfather immediately started spoiling his grandson, buying him all the ice cream and sweet corn on the beach. Later that evening, Gregory and Jim had a serious conversation. Sean was sound asleep, and the men sat in the gazebo, sipping homemade wine. Jim told his father everything, from beginning to end. He confessed to the theft of the painting and the betrayal and treachery of Cathy. Yes, you've made a blockbuster, son. Gregory shook his head. You did a terrible thing to Robin. It's a pity for the innocent girl. Well, as for Cathy, forget about her. This woman is not worthy of you, nor of being your son's mother. You need to divorce her, and my task is to help you with the court. Sean should officially stay with you. What does your wife have, anyway? How can she provide for a child? I've got some connections. I'll try to find out someone who can help us. Yes, we need to play on her bad attitude towards her son, Jim said. Yes, and additionally, I'll register this house for you tomorrow, and we'll make it look like I sold you the service station. That way, you'll be a well-to-do father, both in terms of living space and financially. No, that's unnecessary. I can't accept such donations, Jim objected. It's not a donation. You are my only son, and in any case, I will leave all my wealth to you and my grandson. Please don't object. It can't be otherwise. You see, now I have a sense of life, a second wind. Don't hurt me, son. Let me be happy, at least in my old age. All right, Dad, do as you see fit. Jim resigned himself, not wanting to offend his father. Thank you, son. Finally, I've waited for someone to call me Dad, Gregory whispered and hugged his son. Jim did not dare to judge his father, for he had done almost the same thing to Robin, and if his father was moved by his feelings, Jim was moved by his private interest. Not only did he deceive her, but also framed her cruelly, and all for the sake of Cathy, who betrayed him at the first opportunity. What are you thinking about? Gregory inquired his son. About Robin. I am very guilty before her. I have lost sleep and peace, and I want to go there to repent and try to beg for forgiveness, Jim confessed. "Don't even think about it," exclaimed his father. "You will set yourself up and, God forbid, go to jail. Think of your son first. After all, then Cathy will take Sean away forever. Do you want me to go there? Try to talk to Robin, at least find out what's going on there." "That's not a bad idea. I'd be truly grateful to you." Jim perked up. A week later, Gregory went to see Robin. He brought his son up to speed and asked him to look after the business. For Jim himself, it was a new stage of life. He wanted his father to be proud of him and quickly learned everything. Late one night, Sarah called. The woman was clearly agitated. "Mum, what's wrong?" Jim was scared out of his wits. "Son, I've got Cathy." "Mum, send her away. I don't even want to hear it," burst out the man. "You don't understand. She's back for good. Something didn't work out for her in the personal life. Cathy is very depressed and hopes you can forgive her. I told her I don't know where you and Sean are. Jim, maybe you should meet and talk. In any case, this conversation is inevitable." "Okay, Mum. Tell her to go back to her place. I cancelled the lease on the apartment we were renting. I've moved all her stuff into the tiny apartment. Tell Cathy I'll see her as soon as I get a chance, but only to discuss the divorce." Jim was furious. Who the hell did she think she was? Hoping he'd accept a traitor and a betrayer. Strangely enough, his heartache had long since receded into the background. The man did not hold a grudge against Cathy. He simply stopped respecting her. She died as a wife to him. At that moment, Jim's father entered the house. The man looked rather tired. "Hello, Dad. How was the trip? Did you manage to talk to Robin?" "Yes." Gregory sighed heavily. "I have no right to condemn you, but you did a very vile thing to the poor girl. Robin is in big trouble. Her grandmother is in the hospital with a heart attack. Robin has been fired from the museum. They're trying to charge her with theft. And at the same time, this girl didn't turn you into the police. She loves you. Robin said she lost the keys to the museum, but the police are not stupid. The thief knew the code to the alarm system, and only Robin could have told them. And the whole situation with the lost keys also seems absurd." "I have to go to her," Jim said, lowering his head. "No, she doesn't want to see you anymore. You, son, have caused a lot of heartache. Don't worry, I did everything I could. I bought her mother the necessary medication and hired an excellent lawyer for Robin. And I gave her some money for the first time." "Thank you," Jim said quietly. He didn't sleep a wink all night. Thoughts of Robin kept him awake. In the morning, Jim decided to go see her. He needed to explain himself and beg for Robin's forgiveness. But first, he needed to settle things with Cathy. After talking to his father, Jim and his son left the next day to visit his mother. Gregory asked his son to come back and continue with the family business. "All right, Father, I'll return, but as soon as I've taken care of everything," Jim promised. Leaving Sean with his mother, Jim went to meet Cathy. He noticed that she looked pretty good, apparently fully recovered. "Jim, do you want me to crawl on my knees in this park in front of you? I've thought it over and realised that I've always loved only you. I left Hubert, and I want to keep our family together," Cathy said naively, trying to force a tear out of her eyes. "You're quite the actress, but you're clearly overdoing it now," Jim said calmly. "Don't bother. There can be nothing more between us. I'll file for divorce myself. Sean will stay with me. It's his choice. My son is afraid of you, and he finally told me about your parenting methods." "I'll take him away from you if you leave me," Cathy squeaked hysterically. "No, you won't, Cathy. And let's be honest, you don't even want him. And one more thing, don't you dare come near my mother again," Jim said as he bid her farewell and left, casting a contemptuous glance at her. Getting into his car, Jim drove to the town where Robin lived. He didn't know what he would say in his defence, and, most likely, No words could justify his despicable deed. But this meeting was crucial for him. Jim couldn't live peacefully with this burden on his soul. He would try to do everything he could to make amends. Jim hesitated to get out of the car, but after a few minutes he gathered himself, quickly entered the building, and went up to the second floor. He rang the bell repeatedly, then knocked, but no one opened the door. His visit did not go unnoticed by the neighbours. 5 minutes later the door across the hall swung open. "Why are you knocking? There's no one home," the old woman said angrily. "Where's Robin? Can you tell me?" Jim asked, confused. "At the market selling fish. Where else would she be?" "A thief? She disgraced her grandmother, and she's gone to the hospital." Jim didn't listen further. Running down the stairs, he headed towards the market, which was across from Robin's house. Jim couldn't even imagine how this fragile, delicate, flower-like girl worked on the street selling fish. And it was all his fault. He had driven the poor girl to extremes. Seeing Robin, Jim felt timid, but he dared to approach her. "Hello, Robin," he said quietly, lowering his gaze. "Go away. How dare you come here?" The girl turned pale when she saw Jim. "I beg you, just hear me out," Jim pleaded. "Let's go to the cafe and talk." "I'm at work. If you don't leave now, I'll call the police and tell them everything," the girl threatened. "You won't. If you wanted to, you would have ratted me out a long time ago. Please give me 15 minutes. Robin held herself back from crying. She loved this man very much, to the point of madness, but at the same time, she couldn't close her eyes to his terrible deed and forget everything. "All right, I will listen to you, but only to make you get out of here as soon as possible," she said proudly, taking off her apron and walking towards the coffee shop. Jim told Robin all about Cathy and her terrible disease. In the despair of helplessness, he was ready to do anything to save the mother of their son. He also mentioned that Cathy left him after undergoing treatment and that he no longer loved his spouse, feeling only contempt for her. "I wasn't sure about my feelings for you until the end. I thought guilt was the only thing keeping me from forgetting you, but when I saw you today, I realized I was in love. I don't want to lose you anymore. I don't want you to suffer. Robin, darling, forgive me. Give me a chance. We'll start from scratch," begged the man. "Go away, Jim. I don't want to see you," she whispered, without raising her eyes to her lover. Lowering his head, he silently rose from the table, threw a few bills for coffee and went to the exit. He wanted to howl with despair. He realized that he had lost her forever, and nothing could be undone. "Jim," the man heard Robin's voice and stopped. "Don't go. I can't go without you," the girl said, and threw herself into the arms of her beloved man. Time passed. Today, Jim and family were celebrating a big holiday that brought the whole family together. Robin's grandmother was rocking her great-granddaughter in a stroller. Robin and Sarah were setting a large table in the blooming jasmine garden. Jim, with his father and Sean, were running around with a ball. "Guys, stop playing with the ball. We have everything ready. Let's go to the table," Robin called. "Grandma, Sean has already fallen asleep. Come to us." Mrs. Porter carefully covered the stroller and hurried to the table. As the oldest and wisest woman in the family, she was to be the first to make a speech in honour of the newlyweds. "Sarah, Gregory, we are all very happy for you," said Mrs. Porter, raising her glass with champagne. "You have travelled a long and difficult road on your way to happiness. But as they say, God works in mysterious ways. It was fate that you finally met after years and reunited. Be happy. Cheers." "Thank you, Mrs. Porter, for your warm wishes," said Gregory. "Sarah and I
want to make an announcement. Tomorrow morning we will leave for a well-deserved rest. Jim, now you and Robin own this house and business. And of course, I'm leaving Mrs. Porter in charge. I'm sure she'll take care of you." The man smiled. Robin brushed away a tear, clinging to her beloved spouse. Jim hugged her and whispered in her ear that he was as happy as his parents because he had a beloved woman, a son and a daughter. He dared not dream of greater happiness. Fate finally smiled, giving him the most valuable reward: true love and family.